The aim of this webinar is to help you have a better understanding as to how the Learning Challenge curriculum from Focus Education actually would work for your school. I'm going to use a small slideshow with you to help you see exactly what I mean by this. The main aim behind the Learning Challenge is to provide some excellent learning for the children, to help them gain an awful lot in their substantive knowledge, but to also help them in the disciplinary knowledge to help them become historians, scientists, geographers, technologists, artists, etc. So without any more to do, let me go straight into the screen share. The Learning Challenge curriculum then has been set up in such a way to create an inquiry-based learning environment within each classroom. The whole idea is that we provide children with a very, very important question that we've broken down for them into a number of components for them to look at and investigate and to learn more about the particular topic they're actually looking at. First of all, I want to explain how we have really enabled you as a school to actually make the curriculum bespoke to you. So although we provide a unit of learning for each area, there is more than enough room for you to actually personalize that for your school. If you need any more help from that, you can actually contact the Focus Education Office and somebody will be on hand to give you some support and help in doing so. Each of our units actually has a balance across the substantive knowledge we want our children to learn, that is facts about the major area they're looking at, but also to help them with their disciplinary knowledge, which is actually enabling them to become historians, geographers, scientists, etc., etc. We've also taken account of the Ofsted website, or the Ofsted framework particularly, that came into being in the first instance in 2019 and has actually been updated in 2021 and a further update in 2023. Within that, we are really focusing very, very heavily on children not just knowing more, but also remembering more. And so within each plan, there is an opportunity for children to work on retrieval activities once they've actually finished that unit of learning. Everything is set out in what we describe as composites and components. In other words, a very big area of learning set out as a question, okay, which are then actually complementary, got up to five components with them, which really supports that learning and helps children get the big question. The inquiry-based curriculum is something that we very much believe in, and therefore we are actually leading things with questions all the way through. In addition, we have a unit of work for history, geography, and science that actually gives you, a school, masses of choices. So we haven't gone for just 3 history units per year all the way through. We've given you choices. So some of them, this may appeal to you more than the other. And those choices are fairly evident across them. So if you subscribe to the Learning Challenge, you will have access to all the planning that's available to us. The short-term plans particularly really support teachers. Similarly, in art and DT, we offer a range of supportive planning that would actually mean they could literally pick up and run with that particular curriculum. We also have progression maps for physical education with lots of support in terms of teaching the exact techniques for children. For music, we have progression maps. French, we have progression maps. PSHE and RSE, we also have progression maps. There is also a bespoke early years focus within the Learning Challenge curriculum, with teachers being really enabled to use their own methodology. That is, if they're very much into a child-led curriculum, this offers that opportunity, but provides guidance as to what needs to be covered. If they are into working in themes, that would also be met by what we're actually offering you. There are also links to a major number of quality texts. We are, in other words, really focusing heavily on linking the learning to a really good quality text, okay? So that there is a greater level of opportunity for children to getting engrossed into the major topic we're looking at. Each of our topics will have a focus on substantive knowledge, the facts that children need to gain, but also on the disciplinary knowledge they need to pick up on. So what do we mean by that? Well, on the substantive side, we're looking at facts such as children knowing the names of many of the British rivers, for instance, and knowing where they are. Children knowing what the Romans did to improve Britain. Knowing the difference between a carnivore, herbivore, and an omnivore. Knowing the names and parts of a tree and parts of a plant. And also knowing the specific techniques used by a given artist, such as Van Gogh, Monet, etc. On the disciplinary side, we are really concerned with skills that children will take with them across the curriculum. For instance, knowing the relevance of a specific, knowing the relevance of evidence around a specific period of history, in developing their ability to know what that evidence is, they could put that into many other historical activities or units that they're looking at. They also need to understand the importance of propaganda and censorship, bias, etc., and recognize why they sometimes may be necessary. I think it's Winston Churchill that sort of coined the phrase, history is written by the victors. And helping children understand what we actually see in everyday written down as history may need to be recognized that there may well be elements of propaganda, may well be elements of censorship around what we are told in terms of how things actually happened. Children will also be helped to understand the difference between a primary and a secondary source of evidence. The use of an OS map, for instance, in geography would really help children find a specific place anywhere on an OS map. Similarly, the use of Google Earth, the use of digimaps, these are all part that we've written into the Learning Challenge curriculum. Enabling them to do a sensible and a reasonable sketch on fieldwork is something else that we'd want to develop as children move through the school. Being able to actually carry out an investigation in science and actually isolate a variable may well be needed in so many different ways and in so many different units of learning. And also actually being able to actually understand and explain what went well and what went less well is a skill that I believe children need to really focus on all the science work they're actually doing. So the substantive knowledge and disciplinary knowledge of children is very much at our forefront of our thinking when we were developing these plans. Let's have a look at an outline of one. This is just the overview very quickly for you for a Year 2 class considering the Great Fire of London. First of all, the composite, the big picture, the big question we're asking children to understand is what lessons have we learned from the Great Fire of London? We're not using the Great Fire of London per se, but we want to be a little bit more focused than that. And as you can see, we set off immediately with a disciplinary activity which helps children understand why the fire happened in the first place, or how do we know, the fire happened in the first place. We then move on to help them understand why the fire spread so quickly and why it burned for so long. And they would recognize that in London at that period of time, houses were built very closely together. They had materials within those houses that were very, very quick to actually burn, as indeed the fire actually got hold. We then actually really look at help them understand how we now tackle fires, or how that tackling of a big fire has changed over the years. However, we also want them to know that we haven't got all the problems sorted. We mentioned Grenfell Tower, for instance, as another major fire in London that actually was created just actually, not quite, but perhaps just outside their lifetime, but certainly in the very recent past, and how they attempted to deal with that in a different way. Similarly, we recognize that the wildfires that we have in forests and in woodlands across the world are still causing us great problems today. And then actually really focusing on the question that we're looking at and coming back to that question by really looking at how did the Great Fire of London improve the capital as a whole. You'll notice that in this front page, the disciplinary knowledge that we want the children to acquire has been set out for you as well. So this is just one example that I wanted to share with you to give you a view of what that actually looks like. And as I just run through these, this is the one on the Stone Age. We follow the same thing. What I'm trying to say, in history, this time geography, we virtually follow the same sort of process, okay? That we have to start with a composite, a very important question. We break it into a number of components, and we help the children to develop their substantive and disciplinary knowledge in being able to answer that. The same applies in science. And then we actually really focus on trying to put together for you a progression map, which helps you understand how this might work. So this is one progression or one part of a progression map for history, for instance, okay, where the concept is very much on the chronology and helping us understand how Britain changed over the years. Now, that more or less comes into Key Stage 2, because history is slightly different in a sense that the Key Stage 1, the Key Stage 2 curriculum is quite different, okay? So in Key Stage 1, from early years, looking with perhaps younger children, how things have changed in their lifetime, moving into looking at a specific area. This time I've looked at Blackburn, it could be London, it could be Kent, it could be somewhere in Nottingham, it could be somewhere in Leeds, etc. But basically, we're trying to get you to focus on your specific area and what it was like 50 years ago, okay? And in this case, we're really focusing on grandparents, but we do appreciate the grandparents are sometimes much younger than 50 in this day and age. And then actually looking at beyond living memory with something like the Great Fire of London or the Victorian period, etc., for children. Choices would be provided for you to decide on what you want to use in those particular elements. In Key Stage 2, we largely move from the beginning of the Stone Age to the end of the kind of the Viking, or well, if you like, the beginning of the Norman conquest of Britain up towards year 5, with then an opportunity to look at another period of history beyond 1066, which continues that chronology story. In this case, I've chosen the creation of the British Empire as an important part of our storytelling in terms of how Britain has become the Britain we know today. On the other hand, could choose the time that Henry VIII broke from the Catholic Church, or we could indeed just choose the Civil War and actually really focus. Importantly, that you see the relevance of that. We haven't gone for World War II here, but we have got World War II from a localized point of view, because this is one stem of this history. We've got ancient civilizations to look at. We've also got locality to look at, and that really comes through, including in Key Stage 1, significant and famous people of that time, okay? So basically, you can see how we build it up through the storytelling mechanism that I'm trying to get across to you. Each of our units of learning also include a knowledge organizer set out in the way that kind of came about as the end of the research from the Education Endowment Foundation, who suggested that we look at 4 specific areas. First of all, the knowledge organizer reiterating the key knowledge that you want the children to take away with them, the vocabulary of the new words that they will come across, okay? In this case, we try and retain it to 6. That again comes as a direct kind of recommendation that we don't overdo it, okay? Obviously, there'll be new words, other words that children will come across, but these are key words, key vocabulary that they need for this topic, okay? And you notice that the prior knowledge section is blank at the bottom, and it's blank deliberately to encourage teachers to have that prior knowledge discussion with children before we start the new learning. All we understand and all we've learned about how the brain works tells us that if we're successful in igniting that prior knowledge, we will be highly successful in helping our children to remember things. So what we're looking at here then is that style of knowledge organizer runs right through the history, the geography, and the science units of learning that we've actually produced. So, just show another one there from year 4. We've also really focused on the implementation of the curriculum, okay? And we've gone for looking at the research out there, looking specifically at learning metacognitively. We've come up with the link it, learn it, check it, show it, know it process that runs across each of those units of learning. The link it is basically taking in the prior knowledge and the ignition of prior knowledge from children before we introduce the new learning. As we introduce the new learning, we actually look at bringing in the learn it and the check it, which is effectively the unit or the components that we've talked about earlier, the learn its. The check its are really bits that teachers would use from time to time as a kind of a check to make sure children are still with them, to make sure that everybody's really understood it, and to make decisions about kind of intervention, perhaps, at that stage, if it is indeed necessary. On the show it, we would anticipate this happening at the end of a learning unit, with children being actually really asked to do a memory map, where we have perhaps in the center, say the Romans, and they could write that out in any way they want to, and then the 5 components they looked at set around the outside, something like on an A3 sheet of paper. Some schools have even created memory map books, where children are actually enabled to have a book which is personally theirs, which runs from key stage 2 all the way through from year 3 through right to year 6, which means at the end of the school learning, they're able to tell you about the history they've actually completed in their school. The know it part then is in the end what we call the retrieval tasks, and they are set within the units of learning for you. So effectively, each short-term unit includes your knowledge organizer, includes the activity, makes links to the internet where they're appropriate to do so, and also includes those check-its that I talked about, plus, of course, the retrieval tasks that I also talk about there. But that process, the link it, learn it, check it, show it, know it, runs through each one to enable you as a school to have consistency in the delivery of these units of learning. So I've just very quickly put together for you one unit to give you a flavour of what a typical unit looks like. I've chosen this one midway through the primary age group, and I've gone for a year 3 unit, and it's one of the was on history, which is looking at the beginning of the Stone Age until the end of the Iron Age, okay? Now, because the concept is on change, it's really important for me that that's the bit that really is uppermost in our teachers' minds. So the very front page outlines the substantive knowledge the children will take away with them, hopefully, okay, where we've drawn this from the national curriculum. Then we've actually got the page I showed you earlier, which is the overview page for this unit of learning, which has the composite, which is how did Britain change between the beginning of the Stone Age to the end of the Iron Age, and the 5 components set out there. And you'll notice the very first one is very, very much around disciplinary knowledge. At the bottom is the expectation of the disciplinary knowledge that we will be supporting and developing with our children. And then each of the units goes on to have the knowledge organizer immediately afterwards. We have a reminder of how we're working. We then have some activities for the link it stage right at the beginning before we get into the new learning, with a suggestion that in this case, perhaps children are invited to say about what they think they already know about the Stone Age, okay? What questions they have about the Stone Age, or even something like, what are their initial thoughts about what life must have been like during the Stone Age times, okay? And then we go on to the first component, the first new learning, and this is very much a disciplinary piece of knowledge where children are really building a picture of how do we know this really happened, okay? What evidence is there that this really happened? And for this, really, each of the units, each of the components within each unit has its own set of teachers' notes. These teachers' notes would include the internet links that are available to support this aspect of learning. So in this case, for instance, we will look at Skara Brae, and there's a brilliant unit there for Skara Brae, which is on a video extract. The children can almost take a tour of Skara Brae and understand more about it. Similarly, we've got one there, as you notice, for Stonehenge. So we would start on this particular unit by helping children understand how important the find was in Skara Brae, and how it is probably one of the most important historical finds in the whole of the world, okay? And recognize what it looks like today, and also use that internet link with the children to help them gain a kind of a tour of Skara Brae. And I'd use these 5 photographs with them, okay? I blow them up to A5 in size, A4 in size, sorry, and to help them to really look at these carefully. So having watched the internet link, having studied these 5 photographs, children then asked to think about what can they now say for certain happened during the Stone Age? What do they probably think happened but can't say for certain, okay? And things they now can dismiss as ever having happened, such as dinosaurs roaming the earth at the same time, etc., etc. Okay? So that kind of, okay? So historically, for instance, you'll find a lot of things about the evidence that we have today, where has that evidence come from, etc., etc. Finally, basically, at the end of this unit, we do the same with Stonehenge. However, there are other components, okay? This component, for instance, really from the Iron Age, and just as before, we have our set of teachers' notes, we have the links set out for them to be used, we have a timeline which comes in. We really attempt to ensure that every single historical unit has some level of timelines involved as well. We set it out in such a way that it's easy for the teacher to follow. The activities that children would do are also set out in there. The third one for this one is really about that importance of the discovery of the iron ore and the invention of the wheel, okay? Now, in a sense, many of us may well have done Stone Age period before without actually involving that the importance of the discovery of wheel and how that radically changed life for people of Stone Age time. So we want to bring that into this in that particular way. And children, again, will be encouraged to really think about the impact of the discovery of something like iron ore and the invention of something like the wheel would have had on them, okay? So if I just move on, the 4th unit of learning is about the creation of Iron Age hill forts, okay? Again, why they were so important, because they actually created, or the first evidence we have of real communities living together, perhaps, in our country, okay? And then if we move on from there, we finally look at the term, thinking that, as you can probably see as I quickly went past, to the Stone Age book and so forth, okay? So in a sense, basically, what we are trying to do is to give a comprehensive overview within that period of time we've got, but within them, we build in the check-its, okay? So in the short-term plan, or in that planning we provide for you, we actually give you some examples of check-its you could use. For instance, what do we know about Stonehenge? Or what do we know about Iron Age hill forts? Could be another one you could use instead. Second one is a give me 5 one, okay? So in this case, give me 5 facts about Skara Brae, give me 5 facts about the Iron Age, okay? The third one here is my expand and elaborate part, where we give children a little bit and they're asking them to tell me more. Okay, so we've learned a great deal about the Stone Age because style was sort of working. And finally, we have a pyramid section here. Now, all of this, basically, the bottom 3 there, I hope all my children, most of my children should be able to answer. The top one is a more challenging question for perhaps my more able children, okay? Now, they are given to us as a starter. We have a show it section as well, okay? That show it section is where we are encouraging children on the very last lesson to create their own memory map of what they now know about Stone Age period that we've covered. They will have outlined for them the 5 units of the 5 components that you've actually seen. so they actually write to each of those components correctly. And then we also have the retrieval tasks, which will be all delivered or used with the teacher after the unit is finished. In other words, quite a bit beyond the learning, we will have that as well. So we also have quick quizzes, which is part of them. So we have some sort of low stake quizzes, and there's one for this one, the Stone Age, which includes not just substantive knowledge, but disciplinaries. There's some disciplinary tasks as well as substantive knowledge tasks, or quizzes, if you like, for them to look at. The retrieval tasks are aimed, as in these examples here, are aimed to be quick 10, 15-minute tasks. Ideally, perhaps children might do straight after lunch or something, a term or so after they finish the Stone Age, okay? So in this case, all of these are very similar, so the teacher isn't spending a lot of time explaining. They've seen the format before, but it'll be obviously different for the topic they're looking at, and therefore is trying to aim to make it easy for teachers to administer and use. They're not heavy on marking, because these could be self-marking by the children or partner marking by the children as well. And you can see there are kind of activities, hopefully, that children would really find enjoyable. So that's the type of sort of unit for each of the learning. So we can imagine that we've got 30 lots of this type of short-term planning for history, geography, and every single one for science, because science is actually more prescribed than the history and geography curriculum is, in a sense that every year group has actually been set out within the national curriculum. I hope that you'll find the Learning Challenge curriculum something that really works for your children. We've worked really hard to make the activities exciting, interesting, and motivational for the children, but also we have been conscious of the fact of supporting staff's well-being and indeed their workload when we've been putting these together. Thank you for listening. I hope that's been a help to you. Thank you.